pace thing, but I get to design the games I want. Like in Rebel Fury right now, I taught the game to these guys at GMT, and it was trying to get across to them, you're going to move one piece, and then he's going to move one piece. And you can move one piece, and he can move one piece, and you can move the same piece. You don't have to move the different piece. Because they kept saying, well, I can't move that guy again. I already moved him. I said, no, you can move him as many times as you want until he gets stuck in battle. Just move him all over the damn place. And
so what game is this?
This is my new Rebel Fury game.
Oh.
But the point is I specifically, it's based off of first it's really more based off of Waterloo, which is based off of Gettysburg. But the point is I intended it to be a 19th century wave assault movement game, which it captures very simply. But the advantage of that is that, you're watching, it's like a little bit like chess, right? You move a piece, I move a piece, and there are interactions like that. In fact, I just read an article in New York Times today that chess is on a major, publicity rise across the world with teenagers. It was a front page of the New York Times. Kids are playing chess. Girls, and by the way, girls are playing chess. A lot of them, and
thanks to the Queen's Gambit.
That's what they're saying. But I think also the young women of today are far less tied into the stereotypes of the past that I can tell. I deal with them, and I think that's a very big plus. I mean, I think they're much more empowered.
Vicious.
Huh?
Vicious.
I don't know if they're vicious. I mean, I'm old. Girls are.
In fairness, lots of folks are vicious to Dan.
Yeah,
there we go. There we go.
Yeah, no, but I mean, but I have a lot of granddaughters, and believe me, I've been teaching them chess, and and one of my granddaughters said the other day was, where's Papa? I was, he's off doing a game. He goes, I'll play games with Papa. So they want to play games. That's great.
Yeah, it is great. That is great. There is, as John C. mentioned, there is kind of a table etiquette thing going on here too, and some of that could be generational, I suppose. I have spent there's been a decent amount of downtime in La Bataille because we're doing the chit pull version of the system, right? So, it might be 4 or 5 chits before I get to go, and that might take 45 minutes. But I spend very little time staring at the phone. I'm more inclined to bury my face in a rule book and figure out what the hell is happening.
In that game, you need to do that. I will tell you something though. Going to La Bataille, and so there's a game called Lord of the Rings, which is a really nice game, by the way.
It is.
And there's a rule. I'm going to bring up a rule which I think is very useful to what you're doing, Gary. So and also I use it with BCS also, by the way. You have, in most games, there's going to be some imbalance of chits. Like one guy's got 12 and you've got 8. That's going to happen typically in a lot of games, unless you're really just the historical situation will generate it. So the rule that goes on in Lord of the Rings says that you have these actions, you roll the dice, and that number of dice you rolled is the number of actions you're going to get when it's your turn. However, if you have less, not equal to dice or actions as the other player, you can pass. And I like that rule because, in other words, what it allows you to do is that you don't get this situation where at the end of the turn, the other guy gets 3 unanswered moves. You can control, he's going to get the moves, but you can control when that happens as a tempo thing. I think that's a really good rule. And when you're in a chit game like in La Bataille or BCS, is when I was playing the Ardennes one, right? The Germans have a far larger number of divisions at the beginning of the attack than the Americans do, which makes sense. But that rule allows you to sort of say, oh, I'm not going to go now, you go again. So it forces, I don't get into the situation where you're just holding all the tanks to the last end where I can't do anything, and then you come plowing into me where I have no action, which I find more interesting.
Now, is this a homemade rule in BCS?
Well, I'm stealing the rule from Lord of the Rings, and I'm playing BCS with that as a house rule. But I favor it as a general rule on any. If I'm doing a chit game, I guarantee you I'm going to use that. I continue to use that kind of idea if I'm doing it. Berg was a big fan of the limb. I don't forget what he called them. You're pulling chits, but he called them limbs. I don't remember what it even stands for anymore.
Leader, is it leader activation marker?
Well, it's
Like that?
LIM, so I don't know. Leader Initiative Marker. That's what it stands for.
Yeah, that's what it is. Because GBACW uses that too.
Yeah,
That's the terminology.
he liked it when I used it in Flashpoint Golan. He then took it in and stuck it into Hoplite, and I was like, why are you doing that? He goes, and actually, what's good about shit pulling games is they're much better solitaire naturally games. You get a little bit of randomness without, having to have a bot or something. But the point is that that when you're doing chit pull, like anything where there's going to be a asymmetric, amount of stuff, it solves like what I call end of turn, cataclysms or things like that, which I find to be annoying and not very particularly realistic.
Now, when you're house ruling that rule, when your opponent is it unanimous? Yeah, great, we're gonna do it that way, or not?
Yeah. Well, first off, I have two advantages. Usually, I always present. I don't just spring it on them. I tell them why, and most people don't care. They're up for a good time. So yeah, and I also don't play most of those games. I'm playing them mostly solo, so I'm not fighting with myself.
Right.
So all the players agree to the house rule.
Yeah,
that's what that's about.
Actually, the BCS has a very good rule that I've also used in last Blitzkrieg, where what happens is you put all the chits that are into the cup, right? And you reach into the cup and you pull out 3 of them. Yeah. And whoever gets 2 out of the 3 has to pick one of his 2. And so it works well in last Blitzkrieg because the Germans again have far more number of chits. So in fact, I played a game, my solo game that I recently just took down. And the first day, I think the Germans got like 8 or 9 activation before the Americans got even 1, just because of that, just the preponderance of German chits in there. 2 out of 3. So that's another good way of doing it to get that.
Yeah.
But I think going back to your topic, I'm trying desperately, Dan, to go back to your topic. The unknown factor of that creates tension, and tension is fun for me. It creates some kind of like what's going to happen next. It's like any story. You don't know what the next card is going to be, what the next die roll, the next chit is going to be, which brings some tension, which is fun. When the game is like kind of flat, where it's going, and there's not much happening. That's not much fun either. So it can happen.
It's funny. You just made me think when we were at WBC and we were playing, which I thought was Fire in the Lake, but it was the expansion. But whatever.
Yeah. Fall Saigon. We were playing Fall Saigon.
Right. And you were my partner. Basically, you were telling me what to do because I didn't know what the hell was going on. But I remember the moment where we got beat. Yeah, you slouched back and you were just like,
well,
No. Well, hold on a second.
It's the agony of defeat.
I know.
It's like the agony of it's all Dan's fault.
They gave up, and the players those guys, they don't deserve to win. And
I agree about those guys from the players, Grant and Alexander.
No, it wasn't. I don't remember it being quite as dramatic. You're Italian, you're very dramatic sometimes, but no, the answer is you get beat. Who cares? It's a game. I've even written this down. Like, sometimes like we have these tournaments online and people are very intense when they play a tournament. And sometimes, the really good players get very upset if they lose a game because of what they consider to be some nuance they weren't paying attention to. But the point at the end of the day is, what do you get for it? Nothing. You get nothing. You don't get money. You don't get the trip to Monaco. You don't get the car. You don't get to go to Disney World. You just get congratulations, and that's it.
And I remember you holding on to a bombardment card.
Yes.
Yeah, and you were just like, and as soon as, I don't know, Grant or something kind of went like this, it was like,
And to whoever HB is it Harold Buchanan? I don't know.
Oh, who knows?
There are the 2 moons. HB. There's actually 3 moons. See, there's 1, 2, and there's 3. I'm actually on a distant star, a planet circling a distant star. I'm actually not even on Earth, and this is actually recorded. No, I think those are just a reflection of my spotlights on the window. But this is
talking about distant star. Did you see Interstellar? And what did you think if you saw it?
Wait a minute. Remind me. I definitely saw it. What is the plot of that one?
Earth is gonna starve. Let's go to another system through a wormhole, and it was a ruse.
Oh, is that the one with Sakharov?
No, that's Another Life. Nobody saw that. This is the one with Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway and Michael Caine and.
Oh yeah, I did see it. Yeah, I mean, I look sci-fi. I mean, sci-fi either goes down one of two or three paths. It goes down the space opera path, which means it could be, it could be Romeo and Juliet. It goes down the path of sort of like, very dramatic James Bond movie kind of, shoot 'em up kind of movies, or it's social commentary. So that's kind of what sci-fi uses. Do you remember the famous Star Trek with Frank Gorshin?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Let this be our last battlefield.
Exactly. And very good, Gary. But the whole idea was that one guy had white on the left side of his face, the other guy had black on the left side of his face and white on the other side. And that, I thought that was very cleverly brought up the idea is, racism is stupid. Color of skin is, who gives a shit? And so I thought that was, that's when sci-fi, I think, does good social commentary. And a particularly good episode, by the way. Frank Gorshin was,
is good.
Gorshin he's a good actor.
The best scene, I think the best and maybe most memorable scene in the episode, other than maybe the end where it's an unhappy ending,
of course,
when they're explaining this to Captain Kirk, and Kirk's like, "What?"
Yeah, exactly. That was the point. That was the point of the whole story. I got to see when I was at Stony Brook. I got to actually, in a very small room, got to hear Gene Roddenberry talk twice in 2 separate years, and he was a phenomenal speaker and very cool guy, by the way. Like after the thing, you could walk up to him and talk to him, and he was just. It was like your dad. I was young, obviously, then. But he was just like your dad. He was just nice. And he was funny as hell, too, by the way.
Was he a big guy?
He's about my size. He was about
7.5 feet tall.
Yeah.
But he was, this is a guy who had corporate boardroom presence, right? So he wasn't, I'm in college and with professors that could put you asleep, in about 10 seconds. And this guy, he could talk. I mean, he was a presenter, he knew how to talk to a room, and that's how he sold the show. I'm so sure
he wasn't a blowhard.
Not even a little.
Who's that guy? That Canadian guy who's Conrad Black, for God's sakes! What a blowhard!
Okay,
I think I know who you're talking about, but I'm not 100% sure, and I'm not going to investigate.
The media magnate there. Whatever. Please, I don't want to throw up.
Okay. Well, we don't have to talk about any of those things.
But there was a good question there by Paul West, man.
Yes, I meant to pull that up, and I think we double-clicked on it, actually. How do we feel about where our hobby of wargame is headed? Are we passing along to the next generation the interest? We talked about this something recently, and I don't remember where this was, but I feel like wargaming...
the fun?
Well, I don't know. I'll let us contextualize the fun in a second when I say that I feel like wargaming is in a healthier place now than it has been at any time since 1998, when Avalon Hill got absorbed by Hasbro, and possibly the healthiest it's been since 1982 when SPI got absorbed by TSR. I think we're doing good as a hobby overall, and clearly that says something about what the fun level is at, right? You're always going to have certain types of games that appeal to certain types of people, but not to other types of people. So, I mean, people look at us like we're nuts when we're sitting there playing the same game for 10 hours, 12 hours a day all week, right?
Exactly.
People like we have grown some extra alien heads, but at the same time, we sold the War Room block out this year. There's a lot of people going to be here. So
to feed onto your point, so let me come at it from a totally different direction, right? One direction is the content side, which is what Gary's talking to. Mm-hmm. So what's happened in the world of production is bespoke production is very doable. I mean, it just is. I mean, you can, I watched Gary making 3-dimensional plastic things, right? That's pretty bespoke. He's making whatever the hell he wants. And the printing capabilities and, everything's on computers. I mean, I remember somebody, when we did a Pacific War, they said they're going to use the original mechanicals. Like, you must be kidding, right? They're like film that just died, 20 years ago, so there's no records of the old games. The original games have to be, if you want to redo them, you have to redo them from scratch because there's no physical production material to work from. I literally have to retype in the rules and, mm-hmm. There's no word files, nothing.
Even if you'd wanted to, in the unlikely event.
Well, you just have no starting point other than starting
right.
over. Yeah. You know, when Simonich does a reprint of you know, Empire of the Sun, I mean, he's got all the files. I found him misspelling on the map. He fixes it, and we move on. You know, it's 2 seconds of fixing. But the point is that because of the production has gotten so tractable, even for a very small audience, what it allows is an all endeavors, right? Like it's like Etsy, right? Think about Etsy. You know, you want to have, you know, pot holders for your house that are shaped like rabbits or whatever the heck it is you want. It can be had, and as long as it's profitable, because low production works in this world. And so the thing that will keep wargaming as what we're, you know, the content that you guys are talking about alive is the fact that as long as there's even a few thousand people who want to buy something, you can sell it and make money doing it. And that means that it will continue on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I feel that so when I hear people talking about the hobbies dying and all this, I said, not from the production side. In fact, the production side is like the life support system forever, as far as I can tell. And in some point, and look at print and play, right? You know, like, in other words, my game Ribbit. You know, what's her name? Mary Holland sends me. I just got $21 showed up, which means that they sold 7 Ribbits, right? Because I get $3 a copy, so I could do the math. It's not that hard. So 7 copies of Ribbit were made. She didn't have any inventory. Somebody sent in an order. She sent an email, and somebody made a copy. You know, so the game has got infinite legs. Even if nobody, you know, if it sells if it sells, you know, 30 copies a year, it'll last forever, given that kind of model. So, so I guess from my point of view, wargaming will never die in that context, right? So as long as somebody wants to go war game, they'll sell a war game. Now,
is that print and play model efficient for someone like GMT?
So
no.
Let me give you an example. So I'm going to actually get a copy and show you something you've never seen before.
I mean, so Blue Panther's here. They're not like man in the booth right now, but their booth is right next to me here, and they're you know, here because they work with 6 or 8 different publishers that manage to make this model work.
Okay, so you see this game? It says War in the China Sea.
Yeah.
Okay. This was done I did a contract for the Pentagon not too long ago, in 2018, Center for Naval Analysis. The guy, Peter Pearl, is a good friend of mine. He worked there. And they wanted, an old client of mine wanted a game on, you know, U.S. and China duking it out that they could give to like guys from West Point or Annapolis or any government agency. And so I designed the game with Peter and this other guy, Mike Markowitz, and the 3 of us did this game, and I did all the production through Blue Panther, right? So Blue Panther published this copy with the little wooden box. It's got dice and counters and maps and all that in here. Costs $100 a copy. And for the Pentagon, something that costs $100, it might as well be pencils. It doesn't even register. So in other words, so we bought the Pentagon 100 copies times 100. That's $10,000, I believe.
And that made money for everybody, man.
Well, no,
that's also a rounding error to the Pentagon.
It's not even a rounding error. It's anything under $25,000 is like a purchase order. They just send a purchase order out for $10,000. They get back 100 copies, and literally the Deputy Secretary of Defense sent me an email with rules questions, and I want to tell you that the rules questions were these were serious. These were real rules questions. He found 2 pieces of errata in the game rules questions, you know, on numbers, and they were inconsistent. So the guy, you know, so the Deputy Secretary of Defense played War in the China Sea, and what I did in the game, which was apparently very successful, is I created a solitaire mode, right? But instead of you being the American, you know, where it's the Pentagon, right? So instead of being the Americans fighting the Chinese, the Americans were the bot, and you got to be the Chinese and got to beat up on the United States trying to attack you. And they learned more about China in that way than they would have learned the other way. And that's what I got. That was the feedback I got, that the fact that they could be China and see all the action, you know, manipulating the assets of China against the U.S. taught them more than if they had attacked the bot was China. And it was
now,
very
Mark,
successful.
Is that game publishable or is it publishable?
I did it specifically where I gave up you know, I got paid. It was a one-time payment. I have no royalty. It's
Right, right.
It belongs to the CNA Corporation. It's the copyright is for the Center for Naval Analysis. It owns the copyright, and it's. I mean, it's not like it's not a secret, right? But it's not for sale. It's a government-owned thing.
Oh, so I can't call Steve a Blue Panther and say, print me up one of those.
Call him, see what he says. I don't know.
He's here. You could, if you were here, you could just ask him.
Bring him
Gary,
on.
Gary, why don't you, Gary, you
He's
ask
not
him.
in the room right now.
Yeah, but Gary will ask him for you, see if he can do it. I don't know.
There you go. He'll probably say.
But my point is that as long as that is all it takes to get a game produced, so maybe in the future, instead of paying, you know, $100, Pacific worth $125, you know, MSRP, right? So maybe in the future it's $200, but you know, there's a million Kickstarter games that go for $200.
Yeah.
So if you pay $200, you get your war game, you're happy, right? And meandering Mike says he'd buy one. Sure, you would. And I hope you get the chance to buy one someday. But it's a cool little game, and it does what it's supposed to do, and it's really it's an education game. But my point is that wargaming will not. All these wargaming is going to die. We don't have enough young people. It's irrelevant. As long as production is cheap and people have money and they want to play war games, there will be war games. They'll never end.
And there's no shortage of those folks, right? I mean,
there's a shortage relative to, you know, people who want to watch a movie. There's a lot less of them, but there's more than enough of them. There's about 100,000, and if it's been like 50 to 100,000 for a very long time. I suspect it'll go like that for a while. So as long as you've got a base of 100,000 people who might be interested in a war game, you'll sell 1,000 war games, and at the production cost, you can do it.
That game, when was it published?
Well, the copyright on it is 2018, and that's the correct, you know, that is the correct, 2018.
Would you play it?
I have played it.
No, I'm just saying, would you play it again? Like, is that a fun game?
Yeah, it's fun.
Or is it an exercise? Is it an exercise?
No, it's actually, I made it. It's actually a rather simple game because I was going to, you know, I wanted the Deputy Secretary of Defense to play it. So it wasn't going to be overwrought. So it is kind of fast playing.
Oh, I mean, I was actually impressed by the Deputy the Secretary of Defense, because I thought, Jesus, this guy must be really smart. So you dumbed it down for him.
You're sitting down. Sit down. You may sit down.
Hey, there's
skinny
Grant.
guys.
It is Alexander.
For God's sake.
Look at them. They're here. We're all here together at Buckeye Game Fest.
Greatness has walked in the room.
Nice hat.
He wears that hat all the time.
Guys?
You have any idea what that hat smells like?
It smells like the toilet he couldn't get out of last time.
What the hell's the matter with you?
$15,000 Wi-Fi connected toilet you can play Tetris on.
1,500.
Whatever. I don't. 15,000, 1,500. It's Canadian money anyway.
It's all the same PVC pipes.
Yeah.
Hey, Dan and Mark, good to see you. I'm not a jerk.
So, like, are you guys like, you know, Artie? You're starting to be everywhere now. You guys,
Yeah,
like,
I feel like
don't
it.
you have a life? Don't you have a life?
No,
Don't you have a
I
life?
do. I do not. In fact,
No, I'm
have a
talking
life.
about the bald-headed guy and the
This is
gray-headed
it,
guy.
right. So my wife is very understanding. That's all I can say. And as soon as we get done here, I got to call her about some
Like,
youngster
Jesus,
that's making trouble in our yard again. So
like Alexander, aren't you conquering some country or something? You know what I'm saying?
Well, right now,
Maybe-
Poland's getting their butts kicked. So.
Yeah, we just set up and
Jesus
Poland's in the
Christ.
process of collapsing.
yeah, so they are. Oh, so you guys have started.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Well,
so
you're
there's
playing
not a ton
That's
of
why we were distracted.
Unconditional surrender. I
they're
think I saw
playing
a picture of.
Unconditional Surrender, Sal Basta's game, from GMT,
Good game.
which is a very
Isn't
good
it-
game.
Isn't he making another game based on that system, or someone else
He's been
doing
doing a
it?
Pacific version of it for a while, I think.
Yeah, he's been. I'm guessing he might be having trouble with
a very
that.
long while.
Yeah, but he's got a World War I version coming
Yeah.
too, which is
Hey,
very exciting.
Grant.
Having dealt with that problem, you know, I think I will eventually. I think I've got it figured out. So the next game after Empire of the Sun in that series is I'm doing a Mediterranean one. I'm kind of everybody starts with Europe. They have Barbarossa, and then they try to do the Pacific, and then it's like the Pacific is like a night raid on the Eastern Front, right? It's like a brigade runs into and does something, and so usually there's a scale and compatibility. So So I think the problem the European guys have always had going to the Pacific is they can't scale it down. But I'm going the other way. I'm going to try to scale it up. So I think I got a better plan. So I can do the Mediterranean because it's very land, air, and sea like, and then by getting North Africa working, then I can scale up to Barbarossa in a European version eventually.
That'll be cool. That'll be cool.
We'll play it.
Yeah.
Shut up and take my money, Mark.
Look,
Is that called a Aegean?
I
Is that called a Aegean Strike 2? More Aegean-y? Mediterranean?
I know it's going to be called the Mediterranean. I guess I don't know. I'll come up with I'll call it
Strike.
Il Duce. I'll call it Il Duce. Oh, sorry.
There you go.
Hey, Grant. I just want to bring back a memory, and I want to know because I brought it up with Mark, and he seems to be a little bit cloudy on that memory moment there. When we were playing that Fire in the Latex, that game, when we were playing that game, and I remember you actually at that point brought in so many tanks that you kind of shellacked us. And Mark, do you remember Mark's the way he acted when he knew he was beaten? Do you remember that? Do you remember him just going back on his chair and throwing?
I think that was the same moment that you decided that Dan was going to be his teammate.
Yeah,
actually.
right.
It was like,
I have no memory of that, Dan.
Yeah,
of course you don't.
Yeah,
He was sober.
Dan, it's okay because we were drinking heavily, so you can remember anything you want.
I didn't even know what game we were playing.
I gotta tell you that my memory of that show is there were 2 nights in a row that Dan had a really good bottle of scotch. I forget what it was, Macallan, I think it was.
Whatever.
My wife saw the interview you did. We did an interview, just you and I. It wasn't during the game, but it was just you and I. And my wife saw the video. She goes, "How much were you drinking?" And I was like, "A lot."
I can watch that excellent video production that Dan put together from WBC like 5 years ago, back when we could have that. You'll notice that Mark is his usual very articulate self, explaining deep and difficult concepts, and Dan is absolutely unintelligible.
So no different from normal.
Yep, exactly. This is what I have to deal with every week.
Good shot, Alexander. Can you say water, please?
I got to put that clip up. Yeah, I got to do that. We'll take care of that next week. It's all good.
There you go.
And so, Mark.
Yes, sir.
Your game Rebel Fury, is that right? The new one?
Yes, sir.
Now you said it's like the Waterloo you just did, or the Gettysburg you just did. I forget which one.
There's a lineage from the C3I games. Roger McGowan, my long time friend. He and like Richard Berger, were my two oldest gaming friends. And I had lunch with Dunnigan and Nofi the other day. He's doing well. But I did. Roger called me up. And he said he wanted a friend of his, who could have been anybody, he's a lot of friends, had been looking for a gateway war game, and he couldn't find one. So I did Gettysburg specifically. It has like 19 pieces in it, and I came up with a system that I liked a lot for the 19th century. I feel like 19th century warfare has been looks like Panzer battles in the 19th century most of the time. So I liked a lot of games for that problem. So what I came up with was meant to be allowed you to do the things you'd read in the actual narratives. And then I did Waterloo, but I added in a bit more. It was more the game that I wanted to do. It wasn't as much a gateway game. It was pretty much a gateway game, but it was more what I really wanted to do the first time after I did the first one. And so Rebel Fury is really pretty much a direct descendant of Waterloo. You got detachments, you got HQs, they can go into battle mode. But other than that, it's pretty much straightforward, the same thing. But the battles are really interesting, I will tell you.
Now, it goes back to a question I had asked you. As we get older as gamers, okay? Because designers are gamers too, right?
And I'm ancient, by the way.
You're not that ancient, Mark.
No, as I told Gary, my 44th wedding anniversary is on Friday. So, I've been around her since I was young, but, we're not kids anymore. I'll tell you that.
Let me pull this back to the topic tonight. Believe it or not,
I had a bloody question. Jesus.
By asking the question of how do we keep the fun in the war game?
Well, this This is connected to that question that I was going to be asked, that I was
This
going to
is
ask before I was
exactly as connected as a $15 million toilet.
Jesus. Yeah, but toilet's great, by the way.
Oh, I bet it's fabulous. Heated
Mark,
seats and
so
bidet.
are we getting simpler in terms of mechanics, playing time, this and this and that? And the thing is that I haven't followed which games you're doing mostly right now, other than Pacific War, which is a revamp of an old game. All the games that you're making, and correct me if I'm wrong, are simple.
So there's a guy, an old friend of mine named Doug Watley, who knows me very well. Somebody came up to him and said, Mark's last game was really complicated. He goes, don't worry, the next one won't be. I tend to, like I do after Rebel Fury, well, just, I will do, I do the game I want to play at any given time. And perhaps I have decided I want to play the things I want to, I don't care about complexity as long as it's interactive. I want there to be, an interactive experience. And I still.
Yeah, but Mark, with all due respect, complexity for you is nothing. You're one of those brainy guys that learned everything in class right away and knew everything, and you never gave answers to everybody else. That's all.
That's very kind, and anybody who knows me knows that is incredibly false. But regardless of all that, the point is that I like games I can finish in a session. Now, that doesn't mean the game can't be complex. I just have to have a scenario that is playable in one session. In other words, I want to start and finish in an afternoon. Like I was saying earlier, I played Pericles, 4 guys. We played the full first Peloponnesian War scenario, 5 hours, we were done. We finished it. Now, we didn't play the 10 turn because then we needed another session. So you have to have the ability to play a game in different, like Pacific War, you could play 15-minute engagement scenario, you can play a 2-hour battle, and you can go play the whole bloody war for 200 hours. But
I agree. I like to get the entire game wrapped up in a short session of 165 hours.
Well, again, that's why I keep telling people never play the campaign scenario because that's not going to happen, obviously. But I really enjoy playing South Pacific. It's like 3 hours. Burma's 2 hours. Those are. It's the length of time to me, not the complexity that matters.
It's the length
So
of time.
Do you guys think that war games are getting simpler overall?
No,
I don't think so either.
I mean, I think there's games that are focused on being simple, but
sure,
I don't think as a whole the war games are getting simpler.
Well, for example,
war games were famously complex, and then I think we're adding lots of simple games to it. But this section is not going away. You look at companies like Thin Red Line Games, VUCA Simulations. These are people putting out big, complicated, rich, deep simulation-style games, and there is a huge market for those.
Yeah, well, huge is a relative term, but
relative, obviously.
Right.
well, again, the point you guys just came into is, the age-old question came up about, is wargaming dying? The Greg Kostikian, SPI died for your sins, line of thinking. And I said, as long as as a businessman, production person, which is part of my career, the cost of production is so reasonable that as long as there's literally 10,000 gamers in the world, you can make war games. I mean, there'd be enough of a market, and there's more like 100,000, maybe there's 50,000. I don't know. GMT tells me that they have a 65,000 person active. I mean, this is people who have bought a game in the last year, and there's people who are on their list that go beyond that. They haven't bought one in a few years. Maybe they died or they stopped playing, whatever. So there's plenty. And look at what MMP has been pumping them out. What about eight a week or something like that? So there's no shortage of people buying this stuff, and I don't think there ever will be because the production costs allow it to be profitable. When we were doing S&T magazine, you guys, you've seen enough newspaper movies where they have all the newspapers are being printed on those gigantic web presses, right? You've seen that in a million movies. So S&T was printed on one of those machines. Well, no, but S&T Strategy and Tactics magazine was printed on those machines. But we had like a 2-hour slot every other month. and we had to have, and that's how I got my career started, is we had to have, our mechanicals had to be bolted onto that press on exactly the right time, or we were going to pay huge penalties, which we couldn't afford. So we were able to, so Dunnigan was able to get the production costs down because he got this very tightly restrictive contract to get a good price on their downtime. I think they were printed like in the middle of the night or something like that when nobody was around, but it was very specific contract. And when Jay Nelson fell behind on Highway to the Reich, I got all his games on S&T, and that's how I started my career. I'm very good at deadlines.
I'm going to disagree with Alexander because I think we have always had a selection of simple games. I think we're seeing more games now, right? Than we used to, and it might seem like we have more simple games now, but I'm not really convinced that's the case. I mean, S&T and SPI did tons of simple games. They did a lot of big, super complicated things too, certainly. I mean, I find it a curious phenomenon that's what we seem to remember, right? Or the Highways to the Reichs and the war in Europe and the campaign for North Africa, which has its own reason for, acquiring a mystique, right? Rather than the blue and gray quads, which sold so well that TSR redid them and Decision redid them later, for that matter.
Yeah, see,
those are
super easy. You're exactly right, Artie. But I come down to, there's a lot of different experiences that make something fun, right? But for me, I like the idea that I sat down with some people, had a good time, and we finished. I mean, that to me is fun, and so any game, I don't care about the complexity. To me, I played well, I won't name I had a bunch of friends who like these big Euro games, and I mean, the bloody thing took 8 hours and it sucked. I don't want to say the game. But
say the game,
but it wasn't complex supposedly. It just took forever and it was useless. But my point is that 3 hours is 3 hours. That's it doesn't matter. You could be Einstein sitting on a train looking at a guy in an embankment and the lightning bolt goes off. But other than the relativity of time, 3 hours is 3 hours. And so if I don't care how complex the game is, if you can start it and finish it in 3 hours, it's a 3 hour game. Now, it may be harder to teach a complex game, and that's one of the big criticism of complex games. It's not the length. People incorrectly assume that complexity equals time to play. That is not a true statement. Complexity does equal longer time to teach somebody to play that they can understand what to do. That is where complex games run into problems with a general audience. And so that's a different problem. But a 3 hour game is a 3 hour game. I don't care what, whether it's a Euro game, Ameritrash, war game, high complexity, low complexity, 3 hours is 3 hours.
Yeah, but if you've got, in your 3 hours, you had 20 decisions to make, right? Versus another game where maybe you had 4 decisions to make. I think most folks are probably going to be more engaged in more decisions. Right?
You think the 4 decision game is better?
Maybe. No. Probably no. I would say probably
not in 3 hours.
No. Yeah. I want to make at least a few decisions an hour, I think.
Well, now that's a different issue. That's one of player agency. See, a lot of things, going back to your fun thing, there are some games I've played where I felt like I was irrelevant to whatever was going to happen at some point. The game was almost playing itself. And so player agency, I think, is an important consideration because the reason that people remember those big complex games, they might have played them once in their whole lives in college, maybe, or maybe twice, and that was it, and they remember it for their whole lives because the experience was so enriched. They felt so much player agency over what happened that they really felt immersed in the narrative. That narrative stuck with them. Whereas a game that you play in an hour, it's like it's like eating pretzels. I've eaten pretzels a million times. I can't remember a lot of memorable pretzels in my life. Right. But I do remember the really good meal I had at an expensive restaurant or my wife cooking. That I do remember.
Right.
So complex games have a better chance at creating an immersive narrative. So I think immersive narrative is what creates fun, but that's just me.
I have a question which is a little bit off topic from the sucking of the fun there.
Oh, that never happens.
Oh boy.
Mark.
Yes.
You ever think of because you redid your Pacific War, you went over the rules and all that, and it just made me think. There's all these old games that have all these old Avalon Hill games, all these old SPI games that have rules which are, I guess, for lack of a better word, dated. Don't you feel like you could grab one of those games, remix it, and make it more modern. And if you do get a gig like that, I want 10%.
Well, so I have to tell you that I have had a number of my games, reprinted, but it was never initiated by me. I have little interest other than, somebody comes to me. So the only reason Pacific War got reprinted was a very famous baseball player wanted to print it. And my condition was to have him sign the contract, which is like, the ultimate, baseball autograph. So that's why
we are seeing tons of remixes of old games, though, right? Some straight reprints.
Especially
again, that is the there is a model. MMP is basically using that model, right? They, and because I was the guy who was the business guy, Joe Bolkowski and every name in the hobby from the old days has called me up and said, "Are these guys okay? And how should the contract read?" That's kind of what I always did. So I've gotten I help a lot of people with that. And, MMP is, Bolkowski did Korean War again. And, I did France 1944 with them, et cetera, et cetera. So the reprint things are fine. And there's some really good games back there. But, that as a designer, that is almost in some cases more work than it is fun.
Okay, I understand. I just got it. As a composer, why would you want to revisit your old pieces?
Kurt Schilling, by the way, Alistair.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I think most of us picked up on that.
Yeah.
Have you guys looked at Pacific War?
I've looked at it.
Yep.
It is on my shelf.
It is intense. It is high. It is intense. So
it comes from it. I told everybody when I put it out there, I said this game is like a dinosaur walking amongst mammals now. It's from another era. However,
I felt you were very clear about that.
I couldn't have been clearer. I said, if you think this is going to be a breezy, user-friendly game, you're out of your mind. Okay.
Actually, I remember, Mark, when we were playing Truong Bot there for Fire in the Lake. After you saw the way I played, you turned around and you said, "No, Pacific War, don't buy it, Dan. It's not for you."
So naturally he bought it anyway.
Of course I bought it.
Yeah, but to be fair, so I will tell you that. So Alexander, I know that the big box, and I know your arm's a little bit weak, so you couldn't even pick the box up. Probably did Grant help you do that?
Sit down.
Grant, did you help him pick up the box? I mean, he's a little bit. I mean, he's a frail guy, so I hope you helped him out, Grant. He's your brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to hear.
He drove it over. He drove it over to my house.
However,
and walked it down the stairs for me.
I have played the Coral Sea scenario, Pacific War, easily 100 times. It takes me 90 minutes. In fact, at the GMT East, when the game had just come out, I had a session where I taught the game and they played Coral Sea. It took them like 3.5 hours. The next day, with my friend who I've been playing with since 1985, Gary Gonzalez, Gary Gonz and I played it, and we set up the game and played it in 90 minutes. And Andy Lewis goes, "You're done?" I said, "Yeah, it's all it takes is 90 minutes if you stop fussing around with the thing." So it's a 90-minute game. Now, to you, that seems intimidating, but don't play the campaign game. I don't. I did a few times, but don't play the campaign game. The battle scenarios are fast. They're, I think they're a lot of fun. And what can I tell you?
You see this? David Thompson is not here. David, what's going on?
Oh, look at me. I've got a job and a family.
Why are you not here?
Hi, David.
So,
man.
So I mean, we did spend about 3 months with it right when it came out from GMT, and it's intense to learn, right? I mean, there's a lot going on, but it's also real modular in the sense that you can start with the engagement scenarios and work your way up. Which
you're talking about Pacific War.
Pacific War, yes.
Well, the question is, did you have fun playing it?
Absolutely, and we're gonna get back to it at some point. I'm not sure where we're gonna play the campaign, the strategic scenario.
No, I got to tell you, the scenario to really play, if you want to have something that extends over time, you play Solitaire. The Japanese opening attack campaign scenario is a good Solitaire scenario because the Allies only have so much stuff, but the breaking the Bismarck barrier scenario has enough. It's like South Pacific, right? You got you got New Guinea, you got the islands, you got Guadalcanal, you got carriers, you got all the basic pieces of a of any Pacific game, and that's really a good time. So that one will extend. Oh, and it has the same beginning, but it has like 3 endpoints. So you can just sort of say, okay, we've been playing long enough. We'll just end it on this date. And so, there's plenty of, like I said, I remember once having an equation with video games, and somebody said, how do you know a video game was worth the money? I said, if you got 1 hour for every dollar you paid for the game, you would feel like you got your money's worth. So like I got Civilization
for years.
What's that?
I've been saying this for years.
Yeah, I agree with 100%. So if you play,
I didn't have a problem spending $450 on Second Front because I had gotten my entertainment value out of it by then.
Exactly. And so, I've been playing my favorite video game, and by the way, Sid Meier's is an old friend of mine. I love Civilization. I played it from like when it was like on a mainframe, it was called Empire, I think, originally on the mainframe. And, he sort of modernized it, and it's really great. And I played all the editions, and it's mindless. Sid's genius, by the way, in video games was he said to me that you have to make the player make a decision every 3 or 4 seconds. So as long as you make one decision every 3 or 4 seconds, the game, next thing you know, you've been there for like 18 hours.
Yeah.
Making 3 or 4 second decisions.
I hate that game for that reason. It's so good, and you're like, oh, just one more turn, and then
one more. Let me just clean up the city. Let me get this wonder built. Whatever. Yeah. I went to. I did a job in Australia years ago, and I started playing Civilization, a scenario of Civilization. From the very beginning, like as I flew out of Washington, and I finished it as I landed in Sydney. It was great. The whole trip just went away, and my head was buried in Civilization, and it was great. It was epic. Yeah, and I think I even won with a space race win. Like I actually launched a rocket ship.
Off of that back in the day. I haven't really touched it in a long time, but back when in the Civ 2 days, I played that for hundreds of hours.
Yeah. I played all the editions, and I always know, like, if you're adjacent to Genghis Khan, just start building up your defenses because he's coming at some point. Yeah, it's like the personalities do play out in a fun way. But the point is that so if you get a game like a typical war game nowadays costs about $80 or something like that. I mean, that seems to be a number. So if you bought Pacific War when you should have bought Pacific War, it cost you $79. I guarantee if you bought Pacific War and you played it even a little bit, you would get your money's worth just by playing Battle of Coral Sea and a few other battle scenarios. You would have felt like you got your money's worth at $79. Maybe at $125, you got to play it more. I don't know.
I mean, that's how I've always thought of it, right? If I pay $200 for Third Winter, for example, I mean, I put 200 or 300 hours into that thing.
Yeah.
So I'm good. I'm happy.
Yeah, and if you think about it, I took my wife to lunch in New York City the other day. It was $100, and so the Pacific War was cheaper, and I still have the game,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's what a couple of saltines in New York City.
Oh, absolutely. Well,
what'd you have for lunch, Mark?
Today?
No,
Carol
I mean
made,
$100.
the $100. What did I have? I had chicken parm, and she had eggplant parm, and it was good meal. But I also had drinks. We had drinks. We
okay, there you go.
Yeah, we could have knocked a few bucks off, but we had drinks.
Hey, Mark, I'm gonna ask you this question. I probably asked you a million times, but I forgot what your answer was. World War II. Why did you focus on Pacific War?
So when I was a kid, so there was a series called Ballantine Books did when I was a kid. Ballantine, but so you remember my age. So in 1960. World War II veterans were still in their prime, right? They were younger men, and there was this company called Ballantine Books, and there was just a whole series of war memoirs. All these famous guys wrote Brazen Chariots, which is a topic of that BCS game.
Yeah.
There's a book by a major something. He's a major, but he won a lot of But I read the book. And there was a book called 34 Knot Burke I read when I was a kid. and it's about the slot and all the night battles in. And then I read Morrison's book, Two Ocean Navy, and it had all and so it just was the book selection of the time that got me fascinated with these night battles in the Solomons, which just got to me. And so
okay,
I was more focused on that.
The Pacific War had things like Midway and Guadalcanal.
Great
Iwo
stuff.
I mean, these are all battles that the Marines made themselves in, and that's in the Pacific.
Oh, wait, there's one other detail. My uncle, his name was Henry, but he was called Chick. You can see, the Marines are clever, Hen, Chick, But my uncle Henry was in the 5th Marine Regiment on Guadalcanal and told me stories as a kid too, by the way.
Jesus.
Yeah, he was cool.
I mean,
all right, folks, we have got to wrap it up tonight because we are out of time and things are going on. And I want to thank Mark for stopping by. Thank you, as always, Mark. I would like to thank Grant and Alexander for sitting here patiently while Dan did not allow me to ask them any questions. So now I have to go buy them beers and all that. So
I wish you were. I would buy them beers if I was there, but I'll see you guys
Mark,
eventually.
I have. They have asked me if you would consider coming to Buckeye Game Fest at some point. So we might have to talk about that. It's a great time. It's a great, fabulous event.
It's Columbus, right? Yeah,
Columbus, sunny Columbus.
I just need some warning. I mean, I would drive there. Sure.
There you go. Yeah, it's drivable. It's a little bit.
Look how much fun that is.
Won't cost you $100.
That's true. Yes. And
look how much fun that is. What about me?
It's a great. Dan, you could come down at any time. Dan, all you had to
do
is
I can't.
You could be here right now, as far as I'm
concerned. I can't.
I understand. All right, folks. Thanks, and have a great night. We will see you all next week, same time, same bat channel.
Big move. Big. The moose is loose. Big moves. Big.